Welcome back, adventurer. This week's creatures have been described as a plant born of human seed, the most angelic avian, and the result of an unholy union between a jockey and his horse. So come, pull up a stool at Creature Tavern. Ah, look who's wandered back, my favourite adventurer. Come, sit. I just relit the lanterns. Very atmospheric, don't you think? Ready for our first creature? We're starting this week with the mandrake from European folklore. And like many other creatures we've covered, this goes by a few names. Mandragora, if you're feeling scholarly. Witch's umbrella, if you fancy a bit of flair. But around these parts, folks call it what it is. A root. Sounds pretty harmless, right? Like something you might find in one of me stews. But don't let the name fool you. This root's got more in common with people than plants. The tomes say it grows deep underground, curled up tight like it's sleeping. And when you dig it up, it ain't your usual knot of roots. No, this magical plant looks like a person. Not a full-sized one, mind. Small. About the length of a forearm, I'd say. But with all the markings of humanity twisted into its shape. The stories say they've got arms, legs, even a little head, formed by supernatural will. And it may surprise you to know that there's a male and female type. The male Mandragora is the more common one. Pale as bone, sometimes with a long, twisted beard of fine root hairs. And it smells sweet, like fruit or fresh blossom, with a touch of earth. And it has broad, rounded leaves. Whereas the female root, that's the rare treasure. The few, arguably lucky bunch, to return one of these, say its flesh is dark, almost black. And instead of a beard, the female variant possesses a head of bushy hair. And a scent unlike anything you'll find. It's only ever been described as thick and heavy. So I see that green thumb of yours twitching, adventurer. Well, you won't find Mandragora sprouting in a tight little garden bed. These roots don't care for sunlight or songbirds. They thrive in darker places. And I ain't just talking about the shade. Folks familiar with this one of your magical 5 a day say it's created by soaking blood into the soil. But not just any blood'll do. The blood, sweat and other fluids must come from criminals, murderers, or the condemned. And it's rumoured that blood spilled from bodies swinging on the gallows is best. But this is a plant after all, so really any fluids will do, as long as they're bodily. We're not growing something entirely plant out here, it's just Mandragora. There's a spot out east of here, the old Gallow Hills. Locals call it the Hanging Grounds, where the trees used to hold a more sinister purpose, before the moss swallowed it all up. I've had adventurers come back white as bone, swearing they heard crying beneath the soil. They didn't dare dig. Too scared, I reckon. But it's not just gallows. Oh no, battlefields, execution sites, anywhere the dying bleed into the ground. As long as they're bad, a Mandragora will grow. There's even whispers of witches' gardens. Secret greenhouses where folks in the occult deliberately plant mandrakes with them, we'll just say they use fresh materials. In short, adventurer, if you know of any death grounds nearby, or spot a few rough sorts looking far too pleased with themselves after skulking round a bush, best not go poking at that dirt. Could be you're standing in Mandragora country. Are you ready to hear what this curious root can do? First, you'll want to know how to find one. Visiting areas where the corrupt have died is always a good port of call. But if you're lacking these eerie sights, then some folks say all you need is to seek the aid of a hedgehog or tortoise. Once you've found one happy to cooperate, they'll lead you right to the root. And in pretty much every book I've found on the Mandragora, you can brush the leaves, even disturb the dirt around it a little bit. But the minute you dig and yank at this human-adjacent plant, it'll shriek. A high-pitched, raw-sounding shriek. And it won't just hurt your ears a bit. It cuts through into the bones. Had a couple of patrons say they've seen men drop dead on the spot from hearing one. Brains bust and blood pouring from every hole in the head. But would you believe? It's worse for the ones that live. Driven to madness by the cries of the dirt. Never truly the same again. Once the Mandragora's pulled and settled, it ceases to be of any harm. Now you've got your hands on possibly the most versatile and valuable root you'll ever lay eyes on. Given they haven't been rattled out your skull. Found a scroll on magical plants. It says you'll need to take your muddy prize to your local witch. They'll then properly wash the Mandragora in wine. White or red, doesn't seem to matter. And wrap it in fine silk for safekeeping. Now, it's ready to be utilised. And boy does it have its uses. When asking around, it seems the most common use for a Mandragora is as a talisman or charm to help protect you and ward off evil spirits, or as a conduit for good luck. You can even separate the upper part of that root to help widen the range of these protections. Many texts say you'll need to pop it into a red bag and simply hide it in your home. You can even stitch parts of the root into your clothes for a bit of protection on the go. And if you dry a Mandragora and place it on your mantelpiece, it's rumoured to bring happiness and prosperity to the entire household. And, as an added bonus, it'll prevent demons from entering your home. Or if you're like me, partial to a spot of coin, then you'll love this. Some older legends say the Mandragora possesses ties to riches, that they've got a knack for attracting fortune. Or if one's placed atop some coin, it'll even duplicate it. Sounds far-fetched, I know, but stranger things be true. Of course, I'll need to confirm this myself. So if you happen to stumble on one in your travels, my golden-souled adventurer, be a mate and drop it by the tavern. After it's finished screaming, of course. I'll even throw in a drink. Maybe two, if the legends are true. What I found most curious about these human-shaped roots, aside from the screaming, is that ordinary folk could, and often would, turn them into wee dolls in service of the home. Like tiny servants, said to help with the mundane, like sweeping floors, tidying shelves, even answering questions put to the household. Now if you're of the arcane persuasion, you know, the rune scribbling, robe wearing sort, then I reckon you'll find this next bit mighty interesting. Had an alchemical philosopher in the other day, went by the name Ryan Rigoli, and after a few pints, he wouldn't stop talking about these roots. Said mandrake weren't just some screaming root. No, it could be fashioned into a homunculus and sealed in a glass bottle to serve or even stand in for a magician. And there's a very specific method to it that ain't pretty. That fella Ryan said the root needs cleaned first, dressed, and then over time, let's just say the magician would feed it with his own essence. Human seed, right into the Mandragora over a course of days or even weeks. Strange world when your assistant is half root and half you, isn't it, adventurer? But here's the rub. Having one of these, whether it's a helpful servant or a bottled homunculus, was enough to land you in hot water faster than spilling meat in the Lord's boots. During the witch trials, more than a few were marched off to the stake just for letting their neighbours see that little critter by the hearth. So I'm sure you've caught on by now, adventurer. Left alone, the Mandragora is no trouble, but once plucked, it's as deadly as any fiend that slinks through the woods. This ain't some silly critter for kids to repot in a herbology class. It's a valuable and deadly creature. So would you like to know how to harvest one of these without the whole being driven mad side effect? Well, it's simpler than you think. All you'll need is a dog. Or it could be a horse. Really, any strong companion will do. Even a naive party member. And a very long length of rope. Then just tie one end to the Mandragora, the other to your party member, get yourself to a very safe distance, and get them running. The Mandragora will shriek, so your dog, horse or party member will die, but you'll be safe, and 1 root richer. I suppose if the rope's long enough, your companion may survive, but you'll need a hell of a lot of rope. And if you're not up for sacrificing your dog, some herbologists said these roots can only be harvested on sunset, while others argue that a circle must be drawn round the plant 3 times with a sword or wand, and once it's unearthed, you must immediately cut it while facing west to avoid any negative side effects. Now, if you're feeling a little greedy, then in order to obtain a second root, you must dance around the plant while speaking as much lewd talk about sex as you possibly can. Unfortunately, I couldn't find anything on what to do if you're looking for a 3rd or 4th root, so you're going to have to get creative with that one. Now hold that thought, adventurer. I see one of the cooks flagging me down. Stew must need a touch of that tavern magic. Give me just a tick, and we'll be off into our next creature before your pint even thinks about going warm. Greetings, my curious adventurer of the airwaves. Your ever resourceful Tavernkeeper here, tipping my hat for joining me in episode 7. I'm really starting to enjoy the flow of creating these little audio get-togethers, and seeing all you tuning in each week is the cherry on top. I really can't thank you enough for joining me in this really quite homely tavern. Now on to business. You want to be part of the legend? Like our alchemist, Ryan Rigoli from Blue Sky? Then share the show using the hashtag CreatureTavern on X or Blue Sky. You might just find yourself woven into the story. You could appear as a brash but well-rounded beastmaster, proudly waving around some mysterious hide one of your hounds recovered. Maybe a curious hound whose eager snout uncovered a treasure trove of unusual hides. However you show up, your name will echo through this saga for all time. And while you're feeling generous, why don't you pass the tale along? Tell a friend, a sibling, or anyone you think may enjoy a little tour down folklore lane. Running a tavern full of cryptids and chaos isn't exactly a gold mine. And since we've got no budget for promotion, it's up to listeners like yourself to keep the lights on. And that's the end of this interlude. Thanks again for lending your ears. Now let's return to the roar and rumble of the tavern. Thanks for keeping me seat, woman adventurer. Scooch over. No, I'm pretty sure I was sitting here. Anyways, I reckon we've got enough time for a few more stories before that stew's done. Ready to get into our next creature? Great! Let's get looking into the Huma from Arabian folklore. Huma, or Huma, is the most common name for this creature, but depending on who you chat with, you may hear it called Huma, Hume, sometimes the fortune bird or the phoenix of the east. The ancient stories say the Huma never touches the ground, not once in its entire existence. It lives only in the sky, eternally aloft. In art, it's painted in a few forms. In some, it has no legs. For what use are feet to something that's never known the feel of earth beneath it? And there are stranger depictions that not only paint it without legs, but without wings as well. You can work that one out. Speaking with Huma fans, they describe this creature's plumage as a kaleidoscope of colours, like stained glass of iridescent blues, emerald greens, royal reds, and golden light, shimmering with an otherworldly luminosity. So pure, it'll redefine your understanding of beauty. And its neck, long, graceful, like the curve of calligraphy in an ancient scroll, with a slender, regal body that cuts through the sky as effortlessly as a child's wish, with a long, ornate tail that trails behind like a comet's fire. And lastly, its majestic crested head, said to resemble a crown like that of a heavenly monarch. You can see why it's called the fortune bird. But it's the eyes that linger most in these tellings, deep and soulful, like they've bared witness to every age of man, rise and fall. Now that was a lot to picture, wasn't it? my wide-eyed adventurer. Well, here's a curious mental palate cleanser for you. Lore tells us the Huma is both male and female, in that it possesses characteristics, qualities and traits of both sexes, each sex owning a wing and a leg, as in these tales the Huma actually has those appendages. So where does this divine fowl live? Well, pretty much everywhere. The skies above cities, deserts and oceans alike. High, invisibly high. Higher than most dragons dare dwell. Too high to be seen by most, but sometimes you might just catch the faded flicker of its shadow across the ground. Suppose you'll want to know what this high flyer can do, eh? Well, lean in, adventurer. First, know this. Every single record of the Huma agrees that it's immortal. Not in the way of stone or stars, but through fire. It's not called the Phoenix of the East for nothing. The Huma burns itself alive every few centuries. Not on some funeral pyre or sacred altar. It ignites mid-flight, high above where no eye can reach, morphing into flame, light, ash, and then, from its own embers, reborn, without ever touching the earth. And here's the thing. Unlike the common Christmas goose, no one catches a Huma. Not because they haven't tried, mind you. Oh, I heard from many fools and hunters who've aimed skyward with nets and arrows, labouring for days to no avail. One fella I spoke with, where is he? Where is he? There, that one at the back, with the harpoons. He says he's been hunting a Huma for 50 years. Not seen it once. Now that's dedication. But maybe a harpoon isn't the right tool for the job. What do I know? But if luck's dancing on your hat, and you manage to catch a glance, maybe just a shadow, or a glint of that celestial plumage high in the sky, well, adventurer, the stories say you'll be happy for the rest of your days. And trust me when I say you'd need a lot of coin to mirror a joy like that. And that ain't the half of it. These records are sparse, but from what I could tell, the Huma has been known to grace certain individuals with its presence. And anyone who encounters or manages to touch the fortune bird is destined for a life of prosperity and happiness. And if you're one of the lucky few it favours, you'll receive further blessings. Good blessings, I'm sure, but no script or scroll could shed light on the exact blessings, just that its presence is thought to herald the dawn of a brighter future. Now what's even less likely is when the Huma chooses to rest on a person. Remember, this is a bird of eternal flight, so you can imagine how rare these accounts are to find. But as always, your handy Tavernkeeper was able to uncover one or two. They talk of a belief that the Huma possesses the power to bestow kingship and sovereignty upon an individual of exceptional virtue. And should a Huma sit on you, it's either an omen that you'll become king one day, or you're considered the king immediately. They kick out the old and stick in the new. But the legends were a little unclear on that point. So if you ever feel a warmth on your shoulders from above, look up. It could be the sun, or it might be the Phoenix of the East. Just don't stare too long, adventurer. I don't want any complaints my way. Now, truth be told, you're not likely to encounter the Huma. But if fortune ever takes a liking to you, and you encounter one of these vibrant, hollow-boned wonders, then do not, under any circumstance, try to catch it. Hands, nets, nothing. Don't bother, adventurer. It's believed that Huma cannot be caught alive. If you try, you will suffer death in 40 days. So gaze upon its splendour and enjoy that blessing of eternal happiness. Now that stew should be about ready. Here, I'll fetch you a bowl, adventurer. You'll want something on your belly before starting our next creature. Hello again, dear listener. Hope you're continuing to enjoy your stay here. This old tavern keeper doesn't often get such loyal company. Now, if you haven't already, and you're a kind soul happy to help keep this patchwork roof over me head, then go ahead and subscribe. No silver required, and certainly no deal with any witches. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or pretty much anywhere wavelength weasels make their dens. Just search for Creature Tavern. And now I reach out to you, hat in hand, and ask for reviews. It really helps the show, and I'll be super interested to hear whatever it is you've got to say about the place. And that concludes our little null void chat here, a very short one. We've got no more detours today, so carry on your walk, ride, or maybe you're relaxing. Whatever it is, thanks again for listening. Now let's get back to the tavern. An empty bowl already. Glad you enjoyed it, adventurer. And don't fret, they weren't real Mandragora in there, just a bit of turnip carved to look the part. And now that you've had your fill, let's get to looking at our last beastie for the week, the Nuckelavee from Scottish folklore. The Nuckelavee, also goes by Nuckelavee, means devil of the sea, and it's said the locals don't dare speak its name without uttering a prayer after. This abomination hails from the Orkney Isles, way up north. The islanders say it's the nastiest of all the demons of Scotland's Northern Isles, and they ain't shorting them up there either. Are you ready to know its face, adventurer? Just make sure to keep that stew down. Let's start with the base. Legends say it's a horse, but not like any you've seen hitched out front. This one's got fins fixed to each leg, and it's stripped bare of any tuft of hair and every inch of skin. Just raw, exposed muscle and pale sinew. If you're brave, or maybe enough pints in to get close enough, you'll see every tendon flex and quiver on this pulsating mass. What you won't need to get close up to see are the great thick yellow veins that snake across the Nuckelavee's frame, pumping black blood like tar across a fleshy canvas. And the horse's head. Well, the old fables say it possesses an enormous, gaping maw, and just the one eye, just that one burning red eye, right in the centre. Then up from the beast's back, right where a rider ought to be, there's the torso of a man, or at least what used to be a man. Much like his steed, he ain't got skin, just meat. And folks that have crossed paths with the beastie always mention its arms, far longer than any humans, dangling low enough to drag along the ground as it moves. But in my opinion, the most unnerving feature is its head. No, not the horse's head, the human's. It's far too big, bulbous and swollen, said to gently rock back and forth like a flayed jack-in-the-box. And in some tales, this head has the protruding mouth of, you guessed it, a pig. Some folks tend to liken the Nuckelavee to a centaur. I suppose they're trying to fit this equine horror into a reality they can wrap their heads around, but pay no mind to these naysayers. If you ever see one of these creatures in the wild, there ain't no mistaking it. So you got all that tucked away, adventurer? Can you picture the beast? Well, what if I told you the Nuckelavee only bears that flayed, fleshless form when it walks the land? Aye, once it slips beneath the waves, it takes another form entirely. But no one I spoke with, nor record I found, could shed any light on this aquatic, mysterious shape. So if that hasn't turned you off, or maybe it's turned you on to wanting to go hunt the Nuckelavee, then its favourite haunt is the sea around the Northern Isles of Scotland. Here it swims beneath the black waves, far from prying eyes. But from what the old lore tells, it seems you'll most often find one near beaches or shorelines, although they've been known to wander further inland. So if you're on a lovely beach walk, and the air suddenly grows thick with the scent of brine and seaweed, then adventurer, you best keep your hand on your hilt, and your wit sharper than that blade, for you never know. Could be One's already dragged itself ashore. So, other than shifting forms between water and land, what else can the Nuckelavee do? Well, here's where the tale gets even more interesting. Had a few farmers swing by the tavern the other day. Some of them even had a run-in with the Nuckelavee, would you believe? They said its head exudes a toxic vapour that ain't too friendly to crops. Turned their field into a wilting yellow mass before the sun had got its slippers on. Some had livestock too. And trust me, this unnatural gas didn't sit well with them either. Eyes clouded, foam dripping from their mouths, and staring off into the void. Left the poor soul sick beyond fixing. The Nuckelavee really doesn't like farmers. Many of the books I've found say it's responsible for unnaturally long droughts. And I can't stress enough just how much this creature despises humans. Unless it's a little peckish. Then it'll take great joy in feasting on any and all humans caught in its path. Now I can tell from the look in your eye, you're thinking the Nuckelavee must have at least some love for the horses. Well, my hope-filled adventurer, you'd be wrong. It curses them too. Any horse that becomes target of this skinless steed is stricken with a wasting sickness known as morasheen, a blackening rot that eats them alive, from the hooves up. Only way to eat a horse, I say. And this thing spreads like wildfire. One horse keels over, then 5, then 10, and before you know it, the whole stable's silent. Now looking at you, I assume you're familiar with kelp ash. Sure you are. Used to make soap, glass, that sort of stuff. Well, the people of these northern isles produce quite a bit. And to create it, you got to burn a lot of seaweed. But the stench, the stench. Turns out, that smoke drives the Nuckelavee mad. And not in the way you'd like. Once the smoke's on the wind, that beast starts charging. Literally nothing infuriates this horseman more than this odour. It's sometimes said that in its rage, the Nuckelavee unleashes a wild rampage of plague, spreading across the land like a flood, drowning all it encounters. So if you travel to take to the Orkney Isles, tread carefully, because the Nuckelavee bears naught but ill will for any human soul it crosses paths with. Right then, adventurer. You best keep this next part in that sharp head of yours. It could mean the difference between walking away or not. So if you happen to be in Nuckelavee territory, it's best if it's raining. If it's raining, you're in luck. Seems the Nuckelavie's got no taste for the downpour. Kind of strange, eh? Loves the sea, but can't stand a bit of rain. Never once has it been spotted coming ashore while the skies are open. And in a similar vein, this human horse horror's got no stomach for fresh water. So if its hooves are at your heels, make for the nearest stream. Crossing the river will throw it off. Even a good splash of fresh water has been said to buy just enough time for you to leg it. And lastly, come summer, you and the greater folks of Orkney can sleep a little easier. At least from this demon. Legend says the Nuckelavie's locked away, tight, by the Mythra of the Sea, an ancient Orcadian spirit, and the only entity able to rein in this monstrous steed. And with that, we've finished with our last creature for the week. We've learned that some roots aren't suitable for vegetarians. If a bird lands on your head, you may just be the next king, and to never burn seaweed around horses. Now that bell means it's last call here at Creature Tavern, so grab yourself one more drink for the road, and until next time, tread carefully, adventurer. You never know when you might wander into the weird